Good morning, everybody. I hope you the best of luck, and I hope that you have a very nice day. Before we stopped, we started talking about a certain idea, which is the difference between the quantitative and the qualitative research works, how to differentiate between them, and which type of research to choose according to the topic that we have. So today we are going to complete this part and talk about the details related to this idea. As you have with you, the slideshow is designed by Dr. Les Fitzgerald, and she works in an Institute of Educational Technology, and we are going to deal with the ideas she presents for us because it represents the main concepts that are related to the types of research that we differentiate between which are the quantitative and the qualitative research. As you can remember, we said that we have two main types of research works. We have the quantitative ones and the qualitative ones. The quantitative one deals with the quantities or deals with the numbers, and it describes the pieces of information in a numerical way. And the qualitative method, which depends on the words and the description, and it deals with the data in a verbal way. And we choose which one suits our topic according to a number of points, and if you can remember, we dealt with that in detail during the last lecture that we had. So I'm not going to repeat this part because we already have that. Let's go to the next slide and talk about it in detail. We have basic principles of research design. We know that there are certain features for any research design, and these features are related in a way, and at the same time they are not closely connected. They are distinct and they are related at the same time. You have to know that in any research work there are four main principles or four main ideas that you have to keep in mind. You have the ontology, you have the epistemology, you have the methodology, and then you have the methods and techniques. As you can see in front of you, each one of them is defined. Let's go through them one by one. The ontology is how you, as a researcher or the researcher, how you look at the world. How do you view the world? And what are your assumptions that you make about the nature of the world and the nature of the reality you have in front of you? Because the way you look at the world makes a difference in your research work. It would direct you in a certain way that makes it distinct from all the other research works. So according to this concept, the ontology, this is the main thing that you design your research according to, okay? Because it's your own philosophy in your field, or your own philosophy about the world and about the reality of that world and how it is organized. And this ontology is divided into four main types that we are going to talk about just a few minutes later, inshallah. Okay, so ontology is the reality of the world. How do you view the world and your assumptions about the nature of the world and the nature of the reality. In relation to that, there is the epistemology. Epistemology is based on the ontology, because epistemology is the assumptions that you make about the best way to investigate that world or that reality. Okay, so the ontology is how you see the world and how you see the reality. The epistemology is your own assumption as a research work about how to investigate that reality, how to work with it, how to carry out a research work about it. Okay, then in order to be able to carry out your research work and in order to investigate that world, you need a methodology. What's your methodology? The methodology is the techniques and the ways and the methods that you are going to use in order to be able to investigate the world or to investigate the reality of the world. So the methodology is a description of how you are going to carry out your research work and how you are going to use the different techniques to investigate the world. Okay? And then, according to the methodology, there is a number of methods and a number of techniques that you are supposed to use. Okay? So what are the methods and what are the techniques? They are the ways you are going to collect your data and you are going to carry out your investigation. Okay, so these are four main or four basic principles that are related to each other and that depend on each other. Okay, so again, the ontology is your philosophy about the world and how you see the world and how you see the reality. The epistemology is your assumption about the investigation of that reality. Then the methodology is the way or the techniques you are going to use in order to investigate that reality. The methods and the techniques, how you are going to collect your data or how to collect the pieces of information that you need in order to be able to carry out the investigation and to understand that reality. Okay, all of them together make your research work. Okay, تمام. يا رب الكلام يكون واضح. Okay, so let's talk about the ontology. The ontology is divided into four main schools or four main ways of looking at the reality. Okay, we have the realism, the internal realism, relativism, okay, and nominalism. Okay, so let's look at the realism first. The realism, according to the realism or according to that viewpoint, the world is a real thing. Okay, and science is there in order to examine that reality or to examine that world. And we are going to discover facts about that world by observing it and by discovering things by looking at it or investigating it. Okay, so the world is real and that's why it is called realism. Okay, so there is only one truth only, and everything else is not true. Okay, and according to that viewpoint we have facts. There are facts that cannot be changed, and then there are assumptions which are not facts. They are just your own way of suggesting things. Okay, and this truth or these facts can be revealed if we do experimentation. Okay, this is the first way or the first school of ontology. Okay, everything around us is real, is there, we can investigate it, we can discover facts, and we have to do experiments in order to discover these facts. Okay, and this is the school or this is the philosophy that all the scientists believe in. Okay, then there is another school, and this school is called internal realism. Okay, so according to that school they say yes, there is the world and it's real, but it is impossible for us to examine it directly. It is too big for us, it is too difficult to examine it, it's too obscure for us. Okay, there are truth, but the truth is not easy to discover. Okay, The truth is hidden somewhere, and you have to work very hard and to exert a lot of effort in order to discover it, and sometimes you will not be able to discover it. Okay? There are facts, and the facts are there, and they are concrete, but sometimes it is very difficult to reveal the facts. This is what we call internal realism. Okay? Okay? So they are closely related to the realism, but they believe that it is very hard for us to discover the reality of the world, or to be able to find out the facts. There is another school which a little bit is strange, a little bit, okay, and they call it relativism. From the name, we know that everything is relative. This is the main principle of them, relative. Oh, okay? So, according to that school, they believe that all the laws and all the principles and all the scientific facts are basically created by people in order to make it suitable for their own view about the world. So there is nothing called reality. The reality is created by the people in order to fit their own way of looking at the world, or their own imagination about the world. So there is nothing called one truth. There are so many truths because there are so many people, and every one of them has their own viewpoint. Okay? So the facts, again, depend on the viewpoint of the observer. Okay? What one might see in a certain way might be the opposite to another person who believes in the other way around. Okay? The last one, which is the greatest bizarre way of looking at the reality, which is the nominalism. According to that school, they believe that there is nothing called reality, and the reality is entirely created by people, and there is nothing called external truth. There is no truth at all. Okay? And all the facts and all the beliefs and everything that we think is stable is only created by people. So there is nothing called the truth. It's totally strange, and it is very hard to understand. Okay? So we have four main schools of ontology. I don't want you to care so much about the division and the details of that division, because we are not going to be closely concerned with that. Most of our work is going to deal with realism and internal realism. Okay? The other bizarre schools are highly philosophical, so they are not related to our work. Okay? Of course, all of these are related to each other, and they are formed in something that we call a continuum. A continuum, it means that they are related and they complete each other, and sometimes they overlap. Okay? I don't want you to concentrate on that a lot, because it's going to give you a headache. But we only concentrate on the important part, which is dealing with the world as a real thing, and dealing with it as if it's as it really exists, and there are different truths. Okay? This is the main points that we are going to focus on. The next idea we are going to discuss together is the epistemology. We started with the ontology first, and then here is the epistemology. And we said before the epistemology is how you are going to investigate the reality that you are dealing with or that you believe in. So we have two main schools for epistemology: the school of positivism and the school of social constructionism. Okay, according to the first type, which is the positivism, the people who believe in that school, they believe that everything around us can be observed, and we have to depend on that observation in order to understand the reality and in order to understand the world. And according to that observation, we are going to take notes, and we are going to try to find patterns in these observations, and to understand the world according to that. And this idea, or this way, or this division of epistemology is related to the idea of the or the theory of realism. It is related to realism because it deals with the idea that there is only one truth, and that we need to observe that truth in order to understand the world. The other side, or the other school, or the other division of epistemology, is social constructionism. And according to that, if we look at the name of that, it means that they depend on the social sides. So the world to them is not something that we can discover, or it is not something that we can observe, because it depends on the social relationships and the human beings' view of the world. So here, according to that, or according to these people, reality doesn't exist by itself. We have to look at the meanings that the people create, and we have to focus on their feelings and their beliefs and their ideas and thoughts and concepts about the world, and how they communicate with each other in order to understand the world. And this school, or this epistemology, goes with the idea of relativism very well, because it believes that there is no fixed facts or fixed reality, but the reality is created by the people. So here we have two main schools, and according to these two main schools, we have two main divisions. The one which is quantitative, and the one which is qualitative. If you think about that a little bit, you will find which one is related to which school of these. Let's remember together the first part that we had with the four concepts. We said that ontology is the way you look at the world and the way you consider the reality. The epistemology is how you are going to investigate that reality. The methodology is how you are going to organize your research works in order to be able to carry out that investigation. And then the methods and the techniques, these are the ways you are going to use in order to carry out the investigation. So we dealt with the idea of the ontology and the epistemology, and now it's the turn for methodology. And we said for methodology we have two main types of research works that we are concerned with, the quantitative research work and the qualitative research work. And I asked you to think about that a little bit. When we think about it, we will find that these people who look at the world as a reality, or as a group of realities, and that believe that there are facts that we can observe and we can look at and investigate easily, these people depend on the numerical data, so they are concerned with the quantitative research works, and they like to use the quantitative sources of data. The other people who would like to look at the social interactions and the relationships between people and the facts created by people, these are the people who would like to gather qualitative sources of data, and who will prefer the qualitative research works because they are more suitable for their understanding of the world and for their aims. Okay, but we have to remember that we cannot separate the quantitative and the qualitative research works totally from each other, because they overlap and they are connected together, and sometimes we use part of this and part of that, and they are working on a continuum. As we said, they complete each other, and the different methods and the different approaches that we use in order to be able to carry out the research work will be connected together, so there is no sharp division between the two. but we are just separating them in order to be able to understand each one of them. We have also to remember the role of the researcher, because this affects the choice of your method, and it will affect how you are going to organize your investigation. Whether the research worker is an internal observer of the world or an external observer of the world, whether he is going to investigate the occurrence or the problematic situation from the inside, so he is going to be describing it depending on the internal relationships between the different facts and how they function together and whatsoever, or he is going to look at it from the outside and have an external viewpoint and describe the external features of that phenomena or of that occurrence. Also, whether the research worker is going to be involved, he's going to be part of the phenomenon or part of the occurrence, or he is going to detach himself and look at it from the outside. So these factors affect your choice, and they affect the way you are going to organize your methodology. When we talk about the data, we have to be aware that we have two types of data. We have the data suitable for the quantitative studies, which is the numerical data, and we have the data suitable for the qualitative data, and this is the verbal data. We have discussed this topic before, but let's talk about it again. So the quantitative data or the numerical data is what? It's numbers. It's based on numbers or quantities and percentages. What do we mean by that? If you are carrying out a research work about the development of the students' reading abilities, for example, and you suggest a certain technique or a certain strategy that they are going to use while studying, and then you are going to measure its effect on their reading abilities or the reading sub-skills. So what are you going to do? You are going to have to design a certain type of test for reading, and then you are going to implement that test to the group of students you are working with, and you have numbers, of course, marks, the marks that the students get. You are going to record down these marks in the first exam, and then you will teach them using the suggested strategy or technique, and then you are going to measure the reading abilities again after studying using that technique. So they are going to have another test where they are going to show their reading performance, or they are going to show their abilities related to the sub-skills you have devised. And then you have also you have a group of marks that the students received in the test. So you have a group of pre-test marks, and you have a number of marks for the post-test. The pre-test is the one that occurred or the one that was implemented before you trained them, and the post one is the one that they had after you trained them. Okay, and then what do? You compare the results of the pre-test with the results of the post-test. How are you going to compare that? You have numbers, and you are going to show whether there is an advance in these numbers, whether the students are getting better marks, or they have a better percentage, or they have developed their standard or not. So the analysis here depends on the analysis of the numbers, and in order to be able to analyze the numbers, you are going to use statistical analysis methods, or different ways that are statistically based. Okay, this is what we mean by saying that the data is numerical, or it depends on numbers. Okay, but when we have a qualitative study, for example, talking about the customs and traditions of the Egyptian society, here we don't have numbers, we only have description of the different customs and the different traditions. what we do in the feast, what we do if we're having a wedding, what we do if we're having a new baby, and things like that. So all the data is going to be based on description or based on words, or what we call verbal data. So here this is verbal data, and we use it for the qualitative studies, and here we have numerical data which is used for the quantitative studies, and there is a huge difference between the two. Also, here we have to put into our minds that there are two different sources of data, what we call primary sources and secondary sources. What are these? If we are going to read a book, okay, and this book is written by Thompson, okay, for example, okay, so the ideas that are mentioned in the book are the ideas of Thompson, okay. So when we want to refer to one of his ideas, we are going to go to his book and read about it, okay. Sometimes we cannot find the Thompson's book. What do? We read the works of other people about Thompson's book, okay. So here the Thompson's book itself, if we refer to it, it means that it is the primary source because it is written by the original author. So the Thompson's book itself is the primary source of the information mentioned by Thompson. But when somebody else writes about Thompson's book and you take the words from that person, from that other source, so it is a secondary source, okay. Let me give you another example to explain it a little bit more. My thesis, my own thesis. In my thesis, I write my own viewpoints about different topics or about the topic that I'm interested in. So my thesis is a primary source about my ideas. But in my thesis, I mention the viewpoint of other workers or other writers or other authors. Okay, so my words about the other sources is considered a secondary source. Okay, and there is a huge difference between the two. What should we do as researchers? We should refer to the primary sources as much as we can. If we fail to do that, we can use some of the secondary sources, but we have to say that, and we have to indicate it or to refer to it clearly when we're writing our words. Okay. Also, if you are using online resources, okay, you have to be very careful about the online resources, and you have to check whether they are issued or they are uploaded by an institute or it is just a viewpoint of somebody, because some people publish certain things that represent their own viewpoint, and they are not scholars and they are not specialists, but they are just representing their points of view. In this case, this source is not trustworthy. We cannot depend on it. We have to depend on the trustworthy sources that are published by people who are specialists in the field, or that belong to a certain institution or a certain source or authority that is really trusted with these pieces of information. Okay, so you have to be careful when depending on the online sources, and you have to look at the uploading date, of course, because sometimes we have sources that are out of date. They have changed. The point of view represented in that source is not valid anymore. It was changed by somebody else. Okay, you have to put that in mind, and when you use it or when you download it on your computer to use it, you have to put the date. You have to clarify the date that you downloaded the source in, because this differs. This differs, and this shows the stage of development of the source. Okay, because these sources develop daily, and you have to represent the date or the exact day when you used that material or when you used that source. When you choose your method, or when you choose the approach that you are going to follow in carrying out your research work, you have to be very careful. You have to think about the data you want to collect. You have to think about the viewpoint of your institution and your own experience. You have to consider a number of factors before choosing the approach you are going to apply or you are going to implement while you are working. First, let me draw your attention to something which is very important. There is nothing called the best method. There is a suitable method for each type of research work. So we cannot say that one of these methods is better than the other one. All of them are the same. All of them are used for different purposes, and according to the purpose of your research work, according to your philosophy, according to what you want to study, you are going to choose the method suitable for that. Okay, there are types of research works where the quantitative type of studies is suitable. Okay, so you have to use that. There are other research works that cannot depend on the numerical analysis and has to depend on the verbal analysis. Here you have to choose the qualitative research works or the qualitative type of research works. So it differs from one idea to another and from one field to another. And again, you have to choose what's suitable, not the best, because there is nothing called the best. Okay, and there is nothing called right and wrong answer for choosing your research method. If you choose a certain method, you have to clarify your reasons for choosing that method, and if it's logical, it's okay. If it's not logical, there is a problem here. So there is nothing called right and wrong in the selection of the approach or in the selection of the type of study you are going to consider. But here, let's look at the third point. It says here, whatever approach you choose for your research, you need to consider 5 questions. You have to think about 5 main concerns. The first one, what is the unit of your analysis? Okay, what are you going to analyze? Are you going to work with individuals? And if you are working with individuals, are you going to deal with their level according to a certain skill or their ability to do something or their attitude towards something? Or are you going to be interested in analyzing the ideas of a certain group of people or the advance of a certain company or the change happening in a certain country or what? You have to think about your unit of analysis because you are going to select according to that. If you are going to describe the development of a certain country, for example, here we have to use the qualitative studies. If you are going to deal with the changes occurring in a certain company or the development of a company, this means also that we are going to use qualitative data and we are going to use qualitative research works. If we are dealing with the individuals, so here is the idea. If you are dealing with these individuals as members of a group of people and we are describing something related to them, so it means that we are going to use qualitative data again. If we are dealing with their enhancement of a standard or the development of their skills or the change occurring in their performance or whatever, so here we focus on the quantitative data and we have to choose a quantitative research work. Okay, so you have to think about the unit of analysis you are concerned with. Also, the second point, are you relying on universal theory or local knowledge? What do you mean by that? The explanation comes after that. Will your results be generalizable and produce universally applicable results, or are there local factors that will affect your results? This is a very important point. When you study a certain topic, you will have results, of course. Are these results going to be generalized to a large group of people or to a number of societies, or can be generalized worldwide? If so, this means that you have to choose your sample in a certain way and you have to use a certain type of research works. But if there are factors that will make your results local or related to a certain group and cannot be implemented in other societies, this means that you have to choose your sample in a different way, and you have to choose a different type of approach or different type of studies. Okay, for example, let me give you an example to clarify that. If we are carrying out a research work about COVID-19, for example, okay, the results of that research work is going to be applied to the whole world, to different countries, to different people, to different societies. So this means that we have to follow the scientific method. Why? Because the scientific method is generalizable, more reliable, and give us certain results that we can trust enough to apply to other societies. But if we are carrying out a research work about the conditions of education, for example, or the development of the reading skill here in Egypt with the Egyptian students, this means that this will apply only to the Egyptian society, and this cannot be implemented in other countries. Like مثلا, it can't be implemented in England or in Scotland or in France or in Asia in general, and so on. Why? Because there are factors that are related to the Egyptian students and the Egyptian way of thinking and the Egyptian way of teaching. So here the results are bound to a certain society or to a certain country. So you have to think about that. And here we will use a different type of sampling and a different type of studies. Okay, we can use the experimental studies, for example, or the quasi-experimental studies, because this will be more reliable in that condition. Okay, so we think about the unit of the analysis. This is number one. And the second point is the possibility of generalizing the results of that research work. Okay, the third point. Will the theory or the data come first? What do we mean by that? Should we read the literature first and then develop our theory? Or will you gather the data and develop your theory depending on that? Okay, and remember this, it's like a circle. One point leads to another, but you have to specify what are you going to do? What would you like to do? For example, if we want to develop the speaking ability of our students, what do we need to do? Are we going to collect data about the students first and then we are going to write the theory, or should we read about the theory first and then implement that on the students? It depends on your purpose. If I'm studying something like that, I would say that first I'm going to collect data about the present standard of the students in speaking first, and I'm going to analyze that, and according to the level of the students or the specific abilities of the students in relation to that skill, then I'm going to read the literature related to that standard or related to the problems they are facing. Then I'm going to start to collect data again and have my own theory implemented, proving it right or wrong later on from the results. Okay, so it's like a circle, and you have to specify when are you going to start. Are you going to start from the theory, or are you going to start from the collection of data? Okay, and this is something that you specify according to the nature of your study and according your way of thinking about your study. Okay, so this is very important. The fourth point is, will your study be cross-sectional or longitudinal? Okay, means are you looking at a certain point in time, or are you going to study the changes over time? What do you mean by that? Cross-sectional, it means that we take a certain section and we study that section at this point of time. Okay, now during that year, okay, for example, we are studying the students of, we are studying the development, مثلا, not the development, sorry, This is a wrong example. We are studying the status quo of the students of the Faculty of Education now, this year. Okay, so what are we going to do? We are going to collect a group of students, and we are going to use a number of measures or a number of tests to test their abilities in relation to the certain points we want to focus on, and then we are going to analyze that, find the patterns, and write about it. So here we are doing a cross-sectional study, because we take a certain section of students at a certain point of time this year, not next year. The other type is a longitudinal study, and the longitudinal study focuses on the development of the students. So if we want to examine the development of the students of the Faculty of Education, we are going to start with the students at year 1 or year 2, according to what we like, and then we are going to follow their development throughout a number of years, from the point of the beginning till the point of the end, from this point of time till they graduate, and so on. So here the study is not just going to focus at a certain point of time, which is this year. It's going to follow the students a number of years till you discover how they developed and how they changed and in what direction are they changing. This is a very important point, because the cross-sectional study has certain methods and certain measures that we have to use, and the longitudinal one has different methods and different considerations to put in mind when we are carrying out that type of research works. Okay, the last point: will you verify or falsify a theory? Verify, prove it right. Falsify, prove it wrong. Okay, and here let me draw your attention to something very important. It's not easy to prove a theory right. It's easier to prove it wrong. Why? Because we need just one wrong implementation or just one example that shows that the theory doesn't apply to prove it wrong. But it's very difficult to prove it right, because we need so many examples and so many members, and we need a very long time to prove that. Okay, so you have to think about your interest. Are you interested in verifying it? So you need to exert a lot of effort and to choose a very large sample from different communities, and you have to put it under different conditions and things like that. Or are you going to falsify it, and here you just analyze the data you have or the community around you to prove it wrong by finding something or one situation where it doesn't apply? I think it's much easier to falsify it. Okay, so when you choose your approach, you have to look at these 5 points, and remember that these 5 points will define your approach, but it will not force you to choose a certain approach. It will be logical, and it will be in accordance to certain types. But if you choose something which is not in that direction, you have to give your reasons for that. Okay,